With the release of its first season back in 2003, it didn't take long for NCIS to become one of the most popular investigation dramas in the history of CBS. But since the franchise has been running for around 19 seasons now, it goes without saying that plot holes are quite prevalent. So which are the biggest inconsistencies of the show and how did we miss them? For all this and more, stay tuned. Number 1. Ziva's fluctuating devotion. First up on our list is a mistake that only the sharpest of NCIS fans would have noticed across the show's impressive runtime. And rather than having anything to do with the overall plot of the franchise, it changes the core belief of a beloved character and leaves the audience feeling a bit disappointed. We are of course referring to everyone's favorite officer, Ziva David, who's brilliantly portrayed by the one and only Cote de Pablo. For those of you who weren't paying much attention to the character, it's important to remember where she actually came from. Before joining the NCIS crew, she was a solid member of Mossad, having grown up in Israel as a staunch Jewish woman. This means that her diet had to consist of things that were kosher, with foods falling outside of this category being pushed to the side due to her complex belief system. This isn't something that the showrunners paid much attention to throughout, with her characters sometimes indulging in the kosher side of life, with other meals being far removed from it. Fans who noticed this inconsistency got a different picture of Ziva painted for them. While the rest of us saw her as someone standing firm in her beliefs, others saw her as a character with a constant variation in devotion. And believe it or not, but this was one of the reasons why Cote de Pablo ended up leaving NCIS. Talk about a costly continuation error. Number 2, do Gibbs and Tobias actually know one another? Another plot hole, or a lot more confusing though, and have everything to do with the various backgrounds of the characters we've come to love. A great example is the relationship between Special Agent Gibbs and brought to life Mark Harmon, and Tobias Fornell, who is portrayed by the charismatic Joe Spano. Early on in the franchise, we see the two characters meeting for the first time and get the impression that they don't know each other from a bar of soap. And as it turns out, that's precisely the direction that Harmon and Spano were given in the script. Fast forward a few seasons later, and we come to discover that these two characters actually share a rather complicated past with one another, in which it would have been impossible to not run into one another. They share an ex-wife with one another after all, and it's not exactly believable that an ex-husband wouldn't keep tabs on who his ex-wife was getting married to. Despite how over the relationship you may be, it's information that you're likely to hear considering how many friends you share with one another. This type of thinking from the showrunners also seems to suggest that a new husband wouldn't ask any questions about the previous husband of the woman in question. A ridiculous concept if we do say ourselves, but since the twist was a pretty sharp one, we don't mind giving the showrunners a pass this time. Number 3, is Special Agent Gibbs really as great as they say? And then we have the inconsistencies that make you question how good a specific character may actually be in the working world. Special Agent Leroy Gibbs, for example, is considered by many to be the face of NCIS for a reason, citing his impressive resume and ability to bring perps in without even having to stretch beforehand. Something else that sets him apart from the other agents on the force is his tendency to check his work before making any decisions, leading to a grand total of 0 mistakes within his running of the agency. At least that's what we all thought, until an eagle-eared fan brought the following plot hole to our attention. When discussing the Munich assassinations with Ziva, he mentions that the waiter involved in the little scenario was from Palestine. Take a look at the discovery of the case, however, and you'll see that the nationality of the waiter was actually Moroccan. This could mean one of two things. Either Gibbs made a mistake when discussing the most important case of the season with Ziva, or the prop department screwed up by making a mistake with the drafting of the discovery. Either way, this is a small inconsistency that could have a pretty drastic effect. It paints Gibbs as a character who isn't as perfect as everyone might think, and makes us wonder whether we can actually trust his word going forward. Not exactly what you'd want from your leading man. Number 4, is that another inconsistency in Ziva's character? It's not just Gibbs that makes mistakes though when it comes to a character like Ziva, who clearly has a cultural background and belief system that is different from that of the showrunners. Goes without saying that research needs to be done to prevent any world-breaking inconsistencies. And as we saw earlier, this isn't exactly something that the showrunners put a lot of effort into. Cultural assumptions are actually spread across the franchise, but are missed by many since the vast majority of the show's audience is either American or shares a similar upbringing to our friends in the West. So when we see Ziva reading a piece of Arabic script from left to right, we don't really think much of it. That being said, this couldn't be further from reality. You see, Arabic differs from the scripts we're used to reading in that it reads from right to left. And while we don't blame Coda de Pablo for making this mistake, must be said that the showrunners should have directed her to move her eyes as if she was reading Arabic, not the other way around. It's something small that once again took viewers out of the character de Pablo was meant to portray. And when a character is as flawed as this, it becomes difficult to relate to them. You don't want to see someone representing your culture making such mind-dumbing mistakes, after all. So it makes sense that de Pablo ended up leaving. 5. When the technology doesn't really work that way. Something that NCIS has been applauded for is the use of tried and tested forensic technology, though. It's why the show has become so popular over the years. The audience has a fascination for the tools used to analyze various situations and catch killers, which is why a lot of effort is put into the true representation of what these pieces of machinery can do. But there appears to be a bit of disconnect between what the showrunners actually know about technology and how things work in the real world. And when you've done so much research on forensic tools, it can be difficult to remember how a simple keyboard works. At least that's what we saw in an episode of NCIS in which Abby Scionto and Timothy McGee tried their very best to catch a hacker who was busy breaking into the NCIS system. In what can only be described as a thrilling experience, Scioto and McGee each grab a side of the keyboard in front of them, using teamwork to work faster than the hacker. Funny enough, this keyboard is shown to be typing on 2 separate screens in front of the characters, which is, simply put, not how the keyboard actually works. Suffice to say, we expected a lot more from both Scioto and McGee, who each have their own specialties in the realm of cybersecurity. Pity the showrunners didn't share this interest. Number 6, the shot heard across the world. Last but not least, we have an atrocious plot hole that quite a few fans of NCIS ended up catching, resulting in quite a few complaints reaching the ears of the showrunners. We are, of course, referring to the sequence in which Special Agent Gibbs was shown to have killed Pedro Hernandez. Since this was a massive moment in the runtime of the show, quite a bit of effort was put into the recreation of the moment, with Gibbs firing a shot from his sniper rifle through the front windshield, causing it to hit Hernandez in the forehead. When the sequence was repeated for a second time a few seasons later, though, things looked a lot different. Rather than using the same footage, the showrunners wanted some new angles and ended up shooting the sequence over again. Unfortunately for them, though, they forgot how the scene was previously written and put forward a moment in which Gibbs had actually shot Hernandez through the driver's side window, causing the bullet to hit the left side of his head. Suffice to say, fans were pretty confused as to how the shooting actually went down, with some believing that Gibbs was an untrustworthy narrator because of this mistake. And there you have it, some of the craziest NCIS moments that are regarded as massive plot holes. Which inconsistency is your favorite though, and did we miss out on any others you would have liked to see? Feel free to let us know in the comments section down below.